Hello, everyone. You'll probably notice I have my circus shirt on, circus security, because in this circus, we have all kinds of acts. And today we have another act, which it's not really an act, but I'm just saying another special talent in the circus of psychics, which is past life regression and past life readings. So today we have Kate Buchanan with us, who we met at the MeWe Fair. It's a metaphysical wellness fair, and I was on a panel with Kate, and her answers were just really interesting. She does all kinds of readings, but one of the things she does is past lives. So tell us, Kate, what exactly do you do in the psychic realm?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. I call myself a clairvoyant reader, and clairvoyance is clear sight. So I see things in my mind's eye, which give me information about people's questions, about people's lives, or in this case, past lives. And so I read all kinds of topics, but past lives are an interesting one. And then additionally, not usually at a fair like where we met, but one-on-one, I also do past life regressions, which is uh, it's a process of leading somebody through their own experience of their past lives. So a client would get to start in a deeply meditative state, and I will lead them through a process of regressing back in time and seeing visions of their own past lives. And sometimes we dive deeply into one, or sometimes we visit a couple of different lives that they've had in the past.
So how's a past life reading different than a regression? I know that you kind of said that, but
Yeah,
it's
so a reading, I'm visualizing it and I'm telling you. With a regression, you are experiencing yourself. You will see it yourself. And some people prefer one or the other. I'm really accustomed to reading, and I read pretty quickly. That can happen at one of the fairs that we spoke about, whereas a regression would really you would want to find a really quiet space. We could do this online, or I also will do this in person. um, you're going to want to be laying down, eyes closed, and I walk you through your own experience of visualizing this, experiencing it. Some people go so deeply that they experience the emotion um, of a past life. So
is
it's
that like
me
hypnosis
versus
you
you.
take them into?
It's not exactly hypnosis, but it's such a deeply meditative state that, I mean, you it's kind of hypnosis adjacent.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And then as a clairvoyant reader, I'm actually able to sort of follow along on your progress.
Interesting. So how
Yeah.
did you discover that you were able to do this, or what?
Yeah, great question. Well, I think I'd had an interest in it for quite a while, but years ago, somebody that I knew recommended a clairvoyant reader. And at the time, I thought, well, I believe in the concept of it, but I was quite skeptical of individuals. But this friend of mine recommended a reader, and I went to this reader, and she wasn't. I just loved her vibe. She wasn't so much of a crystal ball, you're going to meet a tall, dark, handsome stranger kind of reader. She saw into my kind of deepest longings, and really validated me. She was able to help talk me through some of the struggles I'd been going through, and I just found her incredibly helpful. And she did a reading of a past life that I had had when I was let me say that differently. She did a reading for me about a dream that I had had over and over and over and over and over when I was a child that ended up being a past life. So after a reading with this woman, I went back a second time, and the second time she told me that she was going to teach. And so I think I had a natural proclivity for it, but her thought was that, or her belief was that, most of us have the capacity to touch into, at the very least, our intuition, if not a deeper experience of our intuition, which is more of reading. And when you're trained at it, when you're given tools and guidance, that comes out over time. So it's like learning to sing. You know, some people might be born with perfect pitch. Some people, no matter how hard they try, may never really be good singers. But most people, with some practice and some training, can develop an ability to do readings.
Well, I have a question. What kind of practice and training do you do, like as a aspiring clairvoyant?
Yeah, well, so this initially I was in a year-long class with this teacher, and I ended up taking I ended up taking like a second and third year course with her, and then the group that developed around her just kept going and going, and so we read together quite regularly for about 10 years. And I still get together with a number of those people to read for one another, both to practice and to be of help to one another. But it's a big variety of practices, and most of them start out with meditation and practices of connecting to the earth, being very grounded, some practices of neutrality. So we're, for the most part, trying to let go of, as a reader, we're trying to let go of our preconceived notions, the things, even the way we see the world, so that we can be a little bit more neutral and honestly see how somebody else might experience the world, step into somebody else's paradigm. So it's about really trying to achieve neutrality. And then a lot of different techniques for visualizing information or receiving information. We've started with something called a rose reading, where the rose represents the individual that we're reading. And I learned to read auras, variety of different things. And the great thing about learning with a group is that we got instant feedback. If I was reading something about you that was incorrect, you could tell me, oh, that's a little off. Try again. And so it's just a lot of practice.
Interesting. So, what kinds of things do people find in a past life regression? Like, what are some of the stories that you can share that were memorable to you?
Yeah. Well, I can start with my own, if that's okay.
Sure.
Um, for me, so I originally, as a child, like a young child, I remember waking up from dreams in my bed as a little kid, and I had this dream that I was a man, that I was a sailor. I was probably in my late 20s, early 30s. I remember being on this huge, I mean, I can still visualize it. I remember being on this boat with tall masts and wearing one of those jackets from I'm not sure. It wasn't as frilly as like a Pirates of the Caribbean costume, but kind of that velvety looking jacket and, you know, tight waist and flared out. And then I remember walking up to the bow, to the captain's quarter. So I think I was an officer of some sort, but I had this dream over and over and over. Um, so later on, uh, as I'd already mentioned, I went to this clairvoyant reader who read that for me, and she was able to give me a little bit more information about it. And then I also did my own past life regression, where I was able to experience it myself. And so it, the reading gave me perhaps information that might be harder to get myself, but um, the reader talked a little bit about the reason I had that life, what it was about, why I went on the voyages I went on. And then later, when I did my own past life regression, I experienced more of the emotion. I had this feeling of longing, of missing somebody, of missing home. Um, I even had the feeling of, the wind on my face and the being on the sea and that sort of thing. Um, what I've experienced with clients has been all over the map. I did a past life regression for a client where he went back to his previous life and he realized that he had been a Nazi. And it was a disturbing experience, but he said, you know what, it actually explained some of the experiences that he was having in this lifetime. It explained to him why he had some emotions and some guilt and all these things that he was experiencing in this lifetime, but he didn't have an explanation for his feelings and his emotions. So for him to go back and realize that he had lived a life where he had committed some atrocious acts, it was actually, in many ways, it was quite healing for him because he had an explanation for it. And then he could actually go back and sort of address it emotionally, um, forgive himself for this past life, and not stay stuck in this guilt that didn't apply to this lifetime.
Well, in astrology, there's something called the South Node and the North Node, and people are said to come in from their past lives as is depicted by the South Node. And astrologers will look at the South Node, the planetary ruler, all these aspects. It's hard to explain, but they kind of create a South Node past life story that's mimicked in how the chart is built in this current lifetime. So it'd say like, like how your soul census machine is built according to your chart. It relates to how you were in certain past lives. And then you're supposed to be kind of moving forward from that past life experience in this lifetime to kind of evolve into something else according to astrologers. So that might have been kind of part of his past life story in his South Node or something where he's like kind of like having certain behaviors from that, and then maybe he'll be moving forward from those behaviors in this lifetime.
Exactly. That's such a great connection.
Nice.
Yeah.
JC, do you have a comment?
I have a question. Okay. So how do you know that it is th that person, or as the person, how do you know that it's your past life? And what does that mean anyway? Like, and then it's not, say, the Akashic record that is global to everyone, and you're kind of pulling out an experience of humanity, that all of humanity, like, but I guess that's, maybe this is a little too philosophical, because how do we know that the energy from that past life is the energy that is like my divine spark, right?
I love that question. I've contemplated similar things before. Um, I don't know that there is one way to know definitively. If I knew that, I think I'd have the answers to a lot of things people contemplate. I think let me see how to answer this in a good way. What I have noticed is that when we experience a past life, whether we're having somebody else read it for us or we are doing a past life regression and experience it for ourselves, either way, I feel like there are personal themes that come up. That now they might be universal themes that are very just human, but I've noticed that they seem to be a little more specialized than that, or a little more specific to your life. Um, but ultimately, um, I to me, in some ways, it it's okay if it is universal because it's still incredibly helpful. Um, uh, I actually the first time I should say one time I did a group past life regression, and I was experiencing a past life, and then all of a sudden I got like pulled out of it, and I was experiencing a different past life, and I could not figure out what was happening until I heard the person who was sitting next to me in this group share what they had experienced in their past life regression. And I realized, oh my gosh, I just started picking up on theirs.
Mhm.
Um, and and I mean, I was a reader by then. But I wasn't, apparently I was being so open that I was just picking up on other people's stuff. So I think that happens. I think it happens that you can pick up on someone else's experience and you're not sure if it's yours or not. I think we all do that emotionally, empathetically all the time. So,
Can I ask
um,
a follow-up question?
yeah, of course.
So I guess we're in the skeptical portion of the episode where we get because we're like actually quite scientific. Like astrologers are kind of math brain people, because we deal with a lot of numbers and stuff like that. So it's like then it makes me want to add on to the question of how much of this is actually beneficial to people because of the storytelling element to it. I think storytelling as a art form has been healing people for thousands of years. I mean, the oral tradition of storytelling. So it's like when I
Absolutely.
think of these South Node, North Node astrologers, as I've always thought for years, I'm like, well, I don't know if the past life was real, but the story of that past life really is helping that client with their current configuration and personality characteristics in this life. So what do you think about the storytelling element is that
I think you just hit on exactly what I was trying to say in a different way. I feel like the storytelling aspect, I mean, if it's a good story, if it's a universal story, if there's something that other people can relate to, just the story can be helpful, whether it's your story or mine. It's a human story that it's archetypal, or can be archetypal, and that we can all relate to. So from that standpoint, I think the storytelling aspect of it is incredibly helpful. Even sharing my own past life with somebody else might be of interest to them because they could relate to it in some way. Um, but even beyond that, I think that what people discover is that when they experience a past life, either through a regression or from a reading, they often have these aha moments of, oh my gosh, that so explains this dynamic I've had with this other person, or that explains this feeling I've had my whole life that I never could explain before. Um, and and so whether it's universal or whether it's specific, either way, I think people end up with answers or a feeling of peace or comfort or just finally having an explanation.
Well, and I think there's something called poetic text and linear text, like in translation theory. So linear text is like 1 + 1 = 2. Like there's pretty much one way to interpret that, right? But like a poetic text is like the green ball floating in the cloud. I mean, I don't know, whatever. But do feel like these things, like these psychic informations or psychic readings, are a poetic text that people can then roll around on and chew on in different ways. Like, a lot of people say, okay, let's say they're having they met somebody and they're just attached at the hip right away. They often say, we were in a past life together. And it's like, that's a poetic way of saying, I don't know why this is so intense, but it kind of makes it okay that you're kind of love bombing each other. You know what I mean? It's like, so I do think, astrology is a way of describing that. We say it's a composite chart. It's this mathematical analysis of the auras mixing that makes people feel that they are alchemically intertwined. But I do think the past life explanation of things like that is very helpful to people, because it's very poetic and says like
Yeah.
this is very meaningful.
Yeah. Oh, I absolutely agree with you. And the interesting thing is, I mean, we all hear about this, the idea of like soulmates and, oh, this person must be my soulmate. I've known them, throughout many lifetimes. I personally believe that that is true to a degree, that we do encounter souls over and over and over again. But I've come to the point in my life having somehow having some of my own experiences and then watching what others have gone through and experienced. I have a different explanation of soulmate, or a different definition of it. I mean, I feel like we encounter the same people, and sometimes the ones that we have the fastest, deepest, most incredible bond with are not necessarily the ones that we must spend the rest of our life with and are made only for us, and we are only for them. But I feel like there are people who come into our lives to teach us something, or to um, mix things up and catapult us into a new direction. Sometimes we end up spending our lives with that person, but I don't think it's. I'm hesitant to say we always do, or that that's the purpose. I think there are multiple reasons other people come into our lives. Yeah.
Well, what do you think about this when there's a mom who has like 10 kids and then there's one kid that she doesn't really like? We have a explanation for that too. It's like the charts just don't mix right. But how do you feel about the past life thing of like my daughter killed me in a past life, or that is that helpful?
I I personally find that intriguing and helpful and fascinating. And it doesn't mean that that daughter's going to kill you in this life. It might mean that that daughter is here so that you two can work something out. And you know that you're coming back together so that you can heal something, or shift something, or wake you up to something, or wake her up to something, or there could be many, many reasons for that. And I feel like we come to our lives with contracts, with agreements that we will interact with somebody in particular ways, so that there can be a healing or a change or an evolution in a new direction. Otherwise, we're just going to be stuck being the same person over and over.
Thanks. Jeezy, you got anything? I got a list.
Yeah, let's go with your list.
Okay, I also do have a past life story of my own if you guys ever want to hear it. But
Oh, totally want to hear it.
Oh yeah.
should I tell it now or should I wait?
Yeah, tell them.
Tell now.
So, in the astrology community, there's this fight over whether or not my past life story is real or if it's just made up. But what it is there was this astrologer he was an astrologer of the Roman Emperor, and his name was Thrasyllus, and he was a Greek grammarian living in Rome. And I've translated a bunch of these Greek texts into English, and my south node line runs through Rome. And so there's a subset of astrologers who think that I'm Thrasyllus reincarnated. But like Jesse, my south node is in Aries and I have a Mars square Sun Mercury. So I came in like fighting intellectually. Like he came in, he was he was like a warrior astrologer because he was, it's a long story. But then my north node is in Libra, and I'm going out making all this art and remedies and stuff like that. So it's like there's this idea, but that brings me to my question. So some people are like, oh, she's a narcissist for thinking she was Thrasyllus, and other people is like, oh, Andy was totally Thrasyllus.
Can I ask you why you think you were?
Because I'm a Greek grammarian, and so I'm an astrologer who's highly technical. So I'm like, like savant on astrology, but then I'm a Greek grammarian. And then also my south node line runs through Rome, where he lived.
Okay, so you haven't had an experience or a memory of it necessarily, but all the signs line up.
Yeah, so what do you think of that? If a person, because there's another astrologer I know who believes she was John Dee in a past life, and that came from not a regression, but from all these facts kind of coming together. So what do you think of that?
Well, I think it's totally possible. And I mean, I wouldn't want to contradict that in any way. I think that it's really easy to have a past life. I think it's easy to have an assumption about a past life. And sometimes we have so many signs in our life that you just can't ignore them. Like, of course you were probably that person. And other times I think we have stuff come up and we make an assumption of what that means, you know? So I'm not confirming or denying you in the moment. But it could mean that you lived back then. And I mean, I could do a reading on it. I'm not really in reading mode at the moment, but I could read that for you. It may be that you were this astrologer, or it may be that it's pointing to some other very similar situation or similar dynamic, or similar person.
Dude, we should do an episode where I hire you to read my past life on Thrassless on video. That would be cool for
That would be
for,
very fun.
for the astrologers. Okay. Well, enough
Yeah.
about me, but I do think it's interesting, and I love how you're like, I cannot confirm or deny or right. Like, but I love the poetic part of this kind of work because it's like that would be a development to have someone read that and be like, well, what I think is this, and then it's like this big storyline, right? That is just juicy and interesting. But it does bring me to my next question, which is, why are people often these like big epic people in their past life? They're never like, you were a guy who did nothing, who, read the newspaper and drank his coffee every day. Like it's always like some thing.
I, I actually, in my experience, it's more the latter.
Oh,
Yeah, I mean, when I do readings and regressions, I mean, every now and then I run into somebody who, might have had a famous or recognized persona, in their past life, but I think more often it's actually someone who's an everyday regular person. I mean, I've read people who've had um, a past, or actually, I did a past life regression for somebody who had a life, and it was a little bit like a little house on the prairie life, but she died in a house fire. I mentioned the man who was a Nazi. He wasn't Hitler, but he was a Nazi, and he was very regretful of that. I've read people who've, had all sorts of different past lives. And so in my experience, that's more common than the notable historical figure. But I think the notable historical figures can come up. They do come up, and it might be one of those cases where somebody, oh, they remember, maybe they were royalty, but maybe they weren't that king. Maybe they're pretty close with who they think they are, or maybe they were. I don't know. Maybe the reason that past life is coming up so strongly is because that ancient persona was so powerful that there's something still lingering about that, or maybe there's something that needs to be healed about that. So they're coming up. What I find fascinating is when I talk to multiple people who think they were the same historical figure. I have a theory about that.
like there's
What's
like
the
10 people who all think they're Cleopatra. Oh, sorry,
Right,
Jason.
actually, that's so funny. I was just going to say Cleopatra.
There's
Um,
more than one psychic in this room now.
yeah, yes, there are. I so okay. The I've studied a little bit with the Huichol shamans in the Sierra Madres from Mexico. I am not a shaman, but I've like learned much from this group and a few others. Um, what the Huichol people believe is that when they call your soul a tonali, when you're or your one life soul. I don't know how to explain it exactly. So when you die, your tonali, your soul goes back to an ancestral soul pool. And in their belief, there were multiple soul pools for the multiple original peoples that lived around the world. So when you died, the funeral rites of that group would help your soul make it back to its own ancestral soul pool. And when it got there, it would sort of dissolve. So you might still have a core piece to it, but a lot of the extra soul matter would kind of go back into this soul pool. And then when a life was ready to come back, it would bring one of those core pieces, or sometimes two or three of those core pieces, together into the next life. And then it would pull from that extra soul matter to create a full person. And so this new person was born. And most people don't have a direct memory of their past life. It's unusual. It's mostly children. That was my own experience. But to me, that explains this idea. Like maybe I got a little bit of that soul material that was in the ancestral soul pool and came back to me. And so I might not have the core piece of Cleopatra, but maybe I have one of her memories that's that was in that ancestral soul pool. The theory extends a bit, or the belief, I should say, extends a little bit, so that if when somebody passes away and their soul doesn't make it back into their ancestral soul pool, it might make it back into a different ancestral soul pool. So, for instance, if a Huichol person leaves the Sierra Madres and they go traveling and they end up in the United States and they die here, and their people aren't there to help guide their soul back, their soul might end up in a Native American ancestral soul pool. And so that's when you get, that's when you might get a Huichol person, growing up in Chicago, to a Jewish family, I should say a Huichol soul, growing up in Chicago to a Jewish family. Or you might get somebody who was, originally from ancient Japan, but they're living in Seattle and they don't feel always like they belong in the place that they were born. And they have this like attraction to this other part of the world that they just can't explain. Like their soul belongs there. So anyway, I kind of just I mixed two theories there, or two ideas there, but one is that we might be born into a place where our soul did not originate, and then two, we might have multiple bits from multiple past lives, and multiple people might have bits from that past life. So
Interesting.
one way to explain it.
JC, have you ever had a past life reading?
No, I have not.
Would you get one?
Yeah, sure, because I'm up for anything. Uh, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I'm still kind of a little bit stuck on the energy part of it, of like understanding. I guess it's just like the rational part of my mind wants to know why I should assume that past lives are something that we can know about. Like it's just so unknowable to me.
Because it's not provable in a scientific lab. What
Yeah, yeah, it's not something that we can prove. Yeah, one way or another.
Well, what about those kids who come back and they can speak another language, or they they start, if you watch like shows on reincarnation, there's kids who like literally know all this stuff about a person they've never met. Or Kate, have you heard about these reincarnation situations?
Yeah, I heard about a fascinating story, and I'm sorry, I'm not remembering the names, but it was in the last decade or so, maybe two. There was a boy who was born here in the US, and he would, as a like 2 or 3 year old, he would have these nightmares of being in a plane and being shot down and dying. And then he started just being fascinated with World War II planes, and he would go through books and and at one point he said, that's my plane, to his parents. Like he was looking in a book and he said, that's my plane. And they're like, what are you talking about? But he's this little kid. And as a they started looking into it, and they found out the name of the man who was killed in that plane. They found out what squadron or whatever he was in, and they took him to a reunion of the men that served with the man that this child thought he was. And he went up to people in this reunion and told them things about themselves that there's no way this 5 or 6 year old could know. Like, oh, hey, I remember you had a dog, and, I saw its photo and it was a black and white dog and blah, blah, blah. Or, I remember you grew up in Ohio or something like that. So he had these memories that he shouldn't have had. And I find that really fascinating. But also, I feel like our culture, our Western culture, is very skeptical of the idea of past lives or reincarnation. But really, around the world and throughout history, it has been very well well documented. Isn't the way to say it, but I mean, it's been a belief. It's been a core belief of so many cultures. I mean, the Dalai Lama is thought to reincarnate. He passes away and he reincarnates in a new body, and they have to go find him. They have to go find what child has been born that is carrying that soul.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, and that's just one example. I mean, ancient Greek cultures believed in it. A lot of Aboriginal, indigenous cultures believe in it. Even some ancient Christian sects believe in it. You know, it's a much more common belief around the world than it is, here in Western society.
It's been proved useful in the philosophical lab. So it's proved it's definitely useful for bored people too. But I mean, I think one of the things psychics do, and I'm pro psychic, Kate. I mean, like, I worked as a psychic for a long time. It's like I believe that psychic information is it is content creation for people who are lacking in interesting content sometimes. It's like maybe your life, you don't know what the meaning of your life is, or you don't know what's special about your life, or and so going to readers can help create a narrative around your soul that is useful and interesting that you can talk about at parties and things like that. So it's like whether or not it's real is not necessarily like what makes it, you know, useful or not. I think, it's like the idea of an imaginary friend. Like, what, instead of saying is spirit guide real or not, it's saying, well, what is the utility of imaginary friends, and why do people utilize that, kind of thing. So I think, let's talk, Kate, about what are some good uses for a past life reading. Like, what I mean, obviously we're going to use it as great content when you read on the show here, but I'm just saying in everyday life, what is useful about a past life reading?
Yeah, I may have touched on it a little bit already, but for me, I mean, sometimes it satisfies curiosity. Um, like for me, in my particular experience, I had dreamt over and over of being this sailor, and I mean, I don't know how many times I had that dream, but I stopped having the dream when I was, I don't know, 3 or 4. And it wasn't until I was a teenager and my mom was reading some Shirley MacLaine book about past lives. And I was like, oh, what's that? And she's like, oh, well, it's this concept about, people being reincarnated over and over. And I said, well, how do you know if you've had a past life? And she said, well, often children have dreams again and again and again that they are a person. Sometimes they're in another part of the world or a different sex. And my mom is explaining this to me and my mouth is dropping open because that was the experience that I had that I had never told anybody about. Um, and and it was such a nostalgic feeling for me. That dream was, and so for me, it was in some ways, I'll say, healing. It brought this sense of connection and sort of like deeper acceptance of myself. Like, oh, I am not a soul who has lived once. I'm a soul who's lived many times. And since then I've had other past life readings and past life regressions and even a spontaneous thing that came in a sweat lodge at one point. And so my own experience was that it just felt deeply reassuring in a way. But beyond my own experience, I've noticed that other people have found it healing, um, healing to have an explanation of the emotions that they've had, or a real draw that they've had to, you know, an ancient Greek life, perhaps in your situation. Um, I I have a real affinity with Egypt. Funny that you mentioned Cleopatra. Um I don't think I was
Funny that
Cleopatra.
you thought of Cleopatra.
Yeah, yeah. I love Cleopatra. I have a
You
fascination with her,
started
but
it.
but implanted that. But yeah, I don't think I was her, but I have a real fascination with even more ancient Egypt than her. So, and I am fairly certain that I lived back then. So it can be reassuring. And then other people actually will seek healing around a past life where trauma happened. Or whether, no matter what side of the trauma they were on, the giver or the receiver, trauma occurred, and it's really helpful to be able to heal some of that in this lifetime. I think sometimes that comes up as ancestral trauma. That's how it shows up in your life, or that's a term that more people are familiar with. But I think past life trauma overlaps with that, can be very similar, have a similar effect in your life. um, so I mean, useful. I think
And
they're
I think GZ, it goes along with the magical and whimsy kind of things. We always talk about like having whimsy and mojo. It's like if you know your past lives, you got a little bit more whimsy going on. Like I think it's nice for that.
Oh yeah, I agree, and I do think that it's also maybe it m- puts a little less importance on this one life and like, the preciousness with which we have to do everything perfectly because it's that this is only one part on the time scale of experience, right? So it does I would think like make you be able to take yourself a little less seriously.
Yeah.
If you can take yourself less seriously enough to open up to having past lives and future lives,
Yeah, how come we never look at future lives? That was
right?
happening.
If time is not a continuum anyway, right? Can we do future life regressions or future life progressions? Can you do that, Kate?
Yeah, Rick Levine told me about those too. He was asking the same question. Okay, so tell us, what about future life progressions?
So I have to be honest, I have never done a future life progression. I have, part of my reading, I feel like we have some choice in like how our lives progress, free will, if you will. And so when we, and I'm speaking about readings in general, but when we understand the potential for where our actions are heading, we do, in many cases, have the power to change that. Um, so when I look at future predictions, it's not necessarily like this is going to happen to you tomorrow, but it's pretty obvious. Like if somebody is metaphorically driving down the freeway at 80 miles an hour with their eyes closed and their hands off the wheel, they are going to crash, so you can really see the energetically, like I can read the cause and effect of things. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to crash at milestone 71 versus milestone 72 necessarily, but like I can see tendencies and likelihoods of things to happen. So because that's the way I read in my clairvoyant practice, that's kind of how I feel about future lives. I feel that we have some choice in that matter, and I do think that I honestly, I don't, I would love to contemplate a little bit more about this idea of like time is circular and what that means for our future lives. But I also believe that when we have some choice in the matter, that it may not be 100% set yet.
That's
Uh,
very healthy in astrology. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay. In astrology, one of the things that, we've come to with our students is it's very healing for them to look at a faded look into the past. Like, okay, you went through a breakup last May. That was in your chart. Saturn went over your Venus. You were in a breakup transit. That's what we call them. And that was faded in some ways. But when we look into the future, it's always healing to have a free will approach to the future. To take a faded approach to the chart, like, oh, you're about to go through a breakup in July, that doesn't work for people. That, it's like to take away their free will is an act, it's a savage act, honestly. And I mean, if we look at the serenity prayer, it's like, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, whatever is fated, the courage to change the things I can, because there's got to be something I can affect, and the wisdom to know the difference, right? It's like we all want that serenity of knowing that we have some effect on our future. And so I agree with you wholeheartedly on that philosophic of these past lives have already happened, so we can say this is what occurred. But looking into the future, we have no idea what's going to occur yet because we're co-creating that, and I think that's super healthy.
Yeah. You know what I'd also add is I think about life as sort of like a river. Um, your life may be going in one direction. Like we do have I feel that we are here to learn specific things, have you might think of it as like, sorry, I don't know the terminology, south node versus north node or something like that. We have where we've been and we have where we're going. But along this river, there are a lot of opportunities to steer left of that boulder or right of that boulder, or, go to the shore and take a rest, or, or have other people in kayaks along the way, paddling next to you. So if our life is a river that's going in a particular direction, there's an element of fate to it, but it's not like, I don't believe that every detail is fated.
Mhm.
Yeah.
We still have 7 minutes of free will on this episode.
Well, I don't know, just in your analogy also of like the speeding down the highway, right? And then closing your eyes and going 80 miles an hour. Like some people would be like, well, Jesus, take the wheel, right? Like, and I won't crash. But on the other hand, too, like then you don't get to direct where it is you're going, and you don't have to have that fun part of like you with God co-creating what this life is going to be like. I don't know. What do you think of that?
Well, in my analogy, what I was pointing out was uh, I can see people's tendencies in their life. When I read that they are behaving carelessly and recklessly, and I can see there's this trajectory that you are headed for a crash. So if you want to change it, you need to change it now. So I mean, I think I was using that example to illustrate something like that. But it doesn't mean that they absolutely have to crash if they decide to put their hands back on the wheel. But I think I think that that's a little bit different, at least the way I'm thinking about it, about, letting Jesus, letting God, letting spirit lead you. I mean, I highly believe in letting spirit lead. And for me, that comes in the form of intuition and synchronicity, and people and opportunities that cross my path that I never would have expected. Maybe in astrology you can see, oh, something's coming, but you don't know what it is. And
Right.
I think the same thing can be true with reading, that I see something is coming your way and you need to be prepared for it, or whatever, or you can just hang out and let it happen. So, I mean, I think we can see those sorts of things. But I think if you 100% think that you are in control of everything that happens, oh,
You are
that's
not in serenity. That is for
right,
sure.
right. So there is something to surrendering to. There's something to surrendering to. And I think, to me, those things can happen together. They're not mutually exclusive.
Okay, in 2 minutes, because I don't want to, talk about where people can find you in the last 2 minutes, but in 2 minutes, how do you think past karma in past lives, like things you've done, like, you know, killed your rabbit or something, that's a bad one. But in your past life, if you've done that, how does it affect your current life?
That's such a wonderful question. I want to acknowledge that different cultures around the world think differently about this. And I think that there's one definition of karma where, if you were a bad person in your past life, you're going to be reincarnated as an earthworm, or, whatever. Like I've heard people, or I've heard, that belief system that, you'll come back as an animal instead of a person. That's not my experience. That's not what I've seen in my readings. What I have seen is more along the lines of, you hurt somebody in a past life, and this is your life to heal that, either with that soul in particular, or within your own soul. You will be in a position where you need to confront a similar wounding. And so I think of it more as like gaining a deeper understanding, finding peace, finding healing. it definitely like what goes around comes around, but for the intention of healing.
That's very positive. I like that. Can let go of all the people that I hurt in my past life. Okay. So, Kate, let's talk numbers. How much is it going to set me back to get a Thracilis reading?
It depends on how we do it. It's usually somewhere around 150.
Okay, for how long?
I'm gonna refer you to my website,
Okay.
because I know people are going to watch this for for multiple years, and the prices may change ever so slightly. So my website is www.theintuitivereader.com. And I have a few different possible approaches um, of different readings and whatnot you can do there. And if there's something that I haven't listed that someone's interested in, I'm happy to talk about that too. And some of what I do is also I am a shamanic practitioner. I don't consider myself a shaman, but I'm a shamanic practitioner, and I do some shamanic healing, like um, soul retrievals and some energy extractions and that kind of thing. And that's more about healing in this lifetime, healing from trauma in this lifetime. But I have occasionally encountered soul retrievals helping people that are still carrying past life trauma.
Nice. So the best place for people to find you is theintuitivereader.com.
Correct.
Okay. And then are you a Facebook person?
No, I'm not. I really need to remedy that. I need to get onto Facebook and Instagram, and I just haven't done that yet.
Okay. Okay. So
Yeah.
the best way is through your website, the intuitive.
But yeah, best ways through my website. I also do participate in some of so I'm in Seattle. And I do participate in some local Northwest fairs, like the MeWe Fair, Metaphysical Wellness Fair that you mentioned. And there's the Northwest Psychic Fair that takes place in Mill Creek. I think it's the second Saturday of every month. So I do some local stuff, and yeah, as well as online. Most of my readings, though, tend to be online,
All right.
just because I have clients all over the country and the continent.
Well, thank you so ever so much for your time today. This was very fun and fascinating. Jay-Z, do you have any last words?
No, that was great. I'm interested, very interested and intrigued.
All
Well,
right.
thank you for the opportunity. It's been a pleasure.
All right,
Yeah.
Kate, have a wonderful day.
Okay. You
Bye-bye.
too.
Bye.